The Concordate fleet moved through space like a hammer falling on an anvil. 400 ships organized in perfect formation, advancing with the confidence of an empire that had never known defeat. High Arbiter Velthun watched from his flagship as Saturn grew larger on the viewscreen. The human defenses looked pitiful by comparison. 5 warships, a handful of platforms, nothing that could stand against the might he commanded. "Display formation," he ordered. It was a traditional Concordate tactic, older than most species' space programs. The fleet would arrange itself in an intimidating pattern, weapons charged and visible, overwhelming the enemy with sheer power before a single shot was fired. Most conflicts ended here, with surrender rather than slaughter. The fleet began its display, ships moving into attack positions, weapon ports glowing with ready power. Velthun waited for the message from Earth, the plea for mercy, the offer of surrender. Instead, Admiral Unichoi's voice came through, calm and cold. "You've come a long way to die. Let's not keep you waiting." The Saturn system exploded into violence. The Concordate fleet learned their first lesson within seconds. Those defense platforms were not simple weapon stations. Each one was a cluster of launchers, firing missiles that moved faster and hit harder than anything the Concordate had encountered. 30 ships took critical damage before they could even react. "Return fire," Velthun commanded. "All ships, target those platforms." The fleet obeyed, turning their weapons on the platforms. Thousands of shots lit up the darkness. But the platforms were deep in Saturn's rings, hidden among billions of chunks of ice and rock. For every shot that hit, 100 more struck nothing but debris, and every time the Concordate ships fired, the platforms tracked their positions and fired back. Captain Minho Park watched the chaos from the Defiant and allowed himself a small smile. "Jisoo, activate the disruptor." "Activating now." The device she had created came online, broadcasting on frequencies the Concordate used for fleet coordination. It did not jam their communications completely. That would have been obvious and easy to counter. Instead, it introduced tiny delays, small errors, fragments of false data. In a small fleet, it would have been annoying. In a fleet of 400 ships trying to move in perfect formation, it was devastating. Ships lost track of their positions. Formations broke apart. Captains received conflicting orders or no orders at all. Within minutes, the perfect Concordate fleet had become a confused swarm of vessels trying to figure out what was happening. "Now," Minho commanded. "All ships attack pattern 7. The 5 human warships had been waiting at the edge of the rings, engines cold, weapons dormant, practically invisible against the dark. Now they came alive, accelerating to impossible speeds, diving into the Concordate formation like sharks among confused fish. The Defiant led the way, its weapons finding targets with brutal efficiency. 1 shot, 1 kill, then moving before the enemy could respond. The other warships followed the same pattern, striking and vanishing using the rings as cover, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. Taeyang Xin at Tactical had spent years studying Concordate tactics. He knew how they thought, how they fought, what they expected, and he used that knowledge to predict their movements, putting the Defiant exactly where the enemy did not want them to be. 2 cruisers breaking off to pursue us, he reported. "They're trying to corner us against the inner ring." "Let them think they're succeeding," Minho said. "Then show them why that's a mistake." The Defiant led the cruisers deeper into the rings, seeming to flee. The Concordate captains thought they had an advantage. They thought wrong. The Defiant suddenly reversed direction, using maneuvers that should have torn a normal ship apart, and came at the cruisers from an angle they had not expected. Both cruisers died before they could adjust. Across the battlefield, the other human warships were creating their own chaos. The TCS Indomitable, commanded by Captain Sung Kang, had specialized in ramming tactics. Sung had argued with the other captains about it, insisting that sometimes the best weapon was the ship itself. Now he proved it, using the Indomitable's reinforced hull to smash through Concordate formations, scattering them like leaves in wind. But the Concordate fleet was learning. They had numbers, and even confused and disrupted numbers mattered. They began falling back into smaller groups, easier to coordinate, harder to ambush, and they started targeting the defense platforms with focused fire, taking them out one by one. "Captain, the Indomitable is in trouble," Jisoo called out. "They're surrounded, taking heavy fire." Minho saw it on his display. Sung's ship was trapped, 10 Concordate vessels pouring weapons fire into its shields. The Indomitable was tough, but not that tough. Not for long. Set course to assist. Maximum speed. Sir, if we break position, the enemy will... I know. Do it anyway. The Defiant crossed the battlefield in seconds, arriving just as the Indomitable's shields were failing. Minho did not hesitate. All weapons fire at will. Taiyang, target their command ships first. The enemy vessels trying to kill Sung's ship suddenly had a new problem. The Defiant's weapons cut through their formations, forcing them to divide their attention. It bought time, but not enough. Minho, get out of here. Sung's voice came through, strained and tired. Save your ship. Not happening. Jisoo, how long until... Captain, the Indomitable is moving, Taiyang interrupted. They're accelerating directly toward that Valix dreadnought. Everyone on the Defiance bridge understood what Sung was about to do. The Indomitable's weapons were nearly depleted. Its shields were gone, its engines were damaged. But Sung had one weapon left. The ship itself. Sung, don't, Minho said. We can get you out of this. You need to stop that dreadnought, Sung replied. It's coordinating their whole right flank. Take it out and you break their formation. This is my call, Captain. My sacrifice. Use it well. The Indomitable crashed into the Valix dreadnought at full speed. The explosion was bright enough to be seen from Earth. Both ships were destroyed instantly. But the blast wave hit a dozen nearby Concordat vessels, and the loss of the dreadnought threw their right flank into complete chaos. Sung had been right. It was the move they needed. But Minho felt the loss like a physical pain. Captain, enemy ships are pulling back, Taiyang said quietly. The whole fleet is retreating to regroup. Minho looked at the tactical display. The Concordat had lost over 90 ships. The defense platforms had taken out 40. The warships had destroyed 50 more. The rest had been damaged by Sung's final attack, but Earth had paid a price too. 7 human warships had entered the battle. Now only 5 remained. The Indomitable was gone, and thousands of crew members had died defending the platforms. Get me casualty reports, Minho ordered, and someone find out if Sung made it to an escape pod. They found him 6 hours later in a damaged escape pod floating near the battle site. Sung was badly injured but alive. When they brought him aboard the Defiant, he looked at Minho and smiled weakly. Did it work? It worked. The fleet is retreating. We bought time. Good. That's what we came to do. The Battle of Saturn's Rings had lasted 6 hours. In that time, the galaxy had learned something important. The Concordat could be beaten. They could bleed. They could fail. In the Concordat fleet, as they retreated to regroup, something unexpected began happening. The conscript crews, the ones forced to fight, started questioning their orders. They had been told this would be easy, that Earth was weak, that resistance was pointless. They had been lied to. A Rithian cruiser captain named Kell made a decision. His crew had not wanted to fight. His species had suffered under Concordat rule, and Earth had just proven that standing up was possible. He broadcast on an open channel. This is Captain Kell of the Rithian vessel Dawn's Light. We will not fire on Earth. We will not fight for oppressors. Any ship that wishes to stand down, follow me. 5 ships broke formation and joined him. Then 10, then 20. The Concordat fleet, already damaged and demoralized, began falling apart from within. High Arbiter Velthun watched in fury as his perfect fleet crumbled. He ordered the defectors destroyed, but even his own commanders hesitated. They had lost too many ships. They had watched the Indomitable's sacrifice. They had seen what desperation could do. On Earth, Admiral Yuna Choi stood looking at the battle reports and allowed herself a moment of hope. They had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The weeks after the Battle of Saturn's Rings changed everything. High Arbiter Velthun retreated with what remained of his fleet, promising vengeance, swearing that the Concordat would return with overwhelming force. But his words sounded hollow now. The illusion of Concordat invincibility had been shattered in those 6 hours of battle. More importantly, the cracks in the Concordat's foundation were spreading. Captain Kell's defection had started something that could not be stopped. Across the galaxy, crews were questioning their orders. Governments were questioning their alliance. The evidence of Concordat crimes was everywhere now, impossible to hide or deny. On a Valix mining world, human slaves rose up, inspired by Earth's resistance. They seized weapons, took control of the facility, and broadcast images of their captivity to the galaxy. The Concordat tried to claim it was propaganda, but the slaves had records, documents, proof of 3 decades of exploitation. On a Thurian trade station, Merchants refused to pay tribute. When Thurian enforcers arrived to collect by force, the merchants fought back. Other species joined them. The station erupted into chaos, and when it was over, the Thurian governor was in chains and the station was free. 5 species officially withdrew from the Concordat, declaring neutrality. They would not fight for the Valaks or Thurians. They would not enforce the old rules. They were done. Ambassador Hana Kim worked harder than she had ever worked in her life. The Free Systems Alliance had started with 7 species. Now it was 15, then 20, then 30. Each new member brought resources, knowledge, and most importantly, the courage to stand up. Earth shared its technology freely, helping other species build defenses, teaching them what humanity had learned during their decade of preparation. Minister Dai Hong coordinated it all, building a framework for cooperation that was everything the Concordat had pretended to be. Real mutual defense, real cooperation, real freedom to choose your own path. On Earth, factories worked around the clock building new ships, new weapons, new defenses. But they were also building civilian infrastructure for the species that had lost everything, standing up to the Concordat, medical supplies for wounded rebels, food for colonies that had been cut off from trade, ships to evacuate populations from war zones. Earth was proving that strength did not have to mean cruelty. That power could be used to protect rather than oppress. Captain Minho Park, promoted to Commodore after the battle, led a joint task force investigating other Concordat crimes. What they found was worse than anyone had imagined. Entire species had been disappeared when they refused to join the Concordat. Not destroyed but enslaved, their homeworlds claimed as Concordat territory. Their people scattered to labor camps across the galaxy. One such species was the Navir, a peaceful people who had refused to disarm 80 years ago. The Concordat record said they had been pacified, their world left as a monument to the price of resistance. But Minho's task force found Navir slaves on a dozen different worlds still alive, still hoping for freedom. The rescue operation took 2 months and required coordination between 20 different species. When the last Navir slave was freed, their leader stood before the cameras and spoke to the galaxy. We thought we were alone. We thought everyone had forgotten us. But Earth remembered. The Free Systems remembered. You did not have to save us. Many of you did not even know we existed. But you came anyway. That is what real peace looks like. That is what real unity means. The speech went viral across every inhabited world. It became a rallying cry for everyone who had suffered under Concordat rule. The old empire was not just losing ships and territory. It was losing the narrative, the justification, the very idea that had held it together. The Thurian collective tried one final assault, gathering the remnants of the Concordat fleet for a desperate attack on Earth. But their fleet mutinied before it even reached Terran space. The crews had families, homes, futures. They refused to die for a government that had lied to them for 3 centuries. The Thurian leadership was overthrown by their own people. The new government immediately sued for peace, offering reparations and opening their records to investigation. The Valaks Empire held out longer, but even they could not fight the inevitable. When rebel forces reached their capital world, High Arbiter Velthan fled rather than face justice. He was never found. Some said he died in the escape. Others believed he was hiding somewhere in deep space, waiting for a chance to return. Either way, his empire was finished. The Concordat officially dissolved 307 years after its founding. The galaxy took a collective breath and began the hard work of building something better. Ambassador Hana Kim stood before the assembly of the Federation of Free Worlds, the organization that had replaced the Concordat. It was different in every way that mattered. Membership was voluntary. Self-defense was a guaranteed right. No species could impose their will on another. And most importantly, the rules were made by all members equally, not dictated by the powerful. This is not the end of our work, Hana told the assembly. Building is always harder than destroying. Peace is harder than war. But for the first time in 300 years, we have a chance at real peace. Not the peace of submission, but the peace of mutual respect. Let's not waste it. The Federation passed its first major initiative that day. A joint task force to find and free all remaining slaves, all hidden prisoners, all the victims of Concordat rule. Captain Sung Kang, recovered from his injuries and given command of the new Indomitable II, volunteered to lead it. I've already died once for this cause, he said with a grin. Might as well make it count. Jisoo Lee became the head of the Federation's Defense Technology Council. Her job was to ensure that no species would ever be left helpless again. She worked with scientists and engineers from 50 different species, sharing knowledge, building better defenses, and always preparing for the possibility that someone else might try what the Concordat had done. Trust but verify, she told her team, and always keep building. Safety through strength, but strength used wisely. Admiral Yuna Choi retired 6 months after the Concordat's fall. She had carried the weight of preparing for war that everyone said would never come, had made the hard choices that had saved humanity. Now she could rest. At her retirement ceremony, Minho stood and spoke. Everyone said the Admiral was paranoid. Everyone said we didn't need weapons, that the Concordat would protect us. She knew better. She saw the truth when everyone else saw comfortable lies. Because of her, humanity survived. Because of her, we're free. Yuna simply nodded. She had never needed glory or recognition. She had needed her people to be safe. Mission accomplished. Nari Song, the colonist rescued from the first Valak station that Minho had found, became an advocate for displaced populations. She worked tirelessly to help refugees, to rebuild shattered communities, to give people hope after trauma. When asked why she dedicated her life to this work, her answer was simple. Someone saved me when they didn't have to. When it would have been safer to look away, I'm just paying it forward. 5 years after the Battle of Saturn's Rings, the Federation held an anniversary celebration. Ships from 100 different species gathered at Saturn, at the site where the old order had been broken. The wrecks had been cleared away, and in their place was a monument. Simple stone carved with the names of everyone who had died in that battle, human and non-human alike. Ambassador Hana Kim gave the anniversary speech, standing before representatives from worlds across the galaxy. 5 years ago, this was a battlefield. Today it's a memorial. But more than that, it's a reminder. Peace was never the absence of weapons. It was the absence of freedom. The Concordat promised peace and gave us chains. The Federation promises nothing but the chance to stand on our own, to defend ourselves, to choose our own future. That's all anyone really wants, the right to be free. The crowd cheered, but Hana held up her hand. But we cannot forget what we learned. Freedom requires vigilance. Peace requires strength. We must never become what we defeated. We must never use our power to oppress others. That is the real challenge. Not winning the war, but winning the peace that follows. On the Defiant, now a museum ship orbiting Earth, Captain Minho Park stood in the empty bridge and remembered. He remembered the choice he had made to engage those Valak's cruisers. The choice that had started everything. He had disobeyed orders, risked his mission, possibly doomed humanity by revealing their secret, and he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. A young cadet approached him, part of a tour group visiting the historic ship. Sir, did you ever regret it? Starting the war? Minho thought about Sung's sacrifice, about the thousands who had died in the fighting, about the long, hard road to peace. Then he thought about the slaves freed, the species liberated, the galaxy changed. I didn't start a war, he said finally. I ended one. A war that had been going on for 300 years, hidden behind pretty words and false promises. We just made it visible. The cadet nodded and moved on. Minho stayed on the bridge a while longer, looking at the stars through the view screen. Out there, hundreds of species were building a future together. Not because they were forced to, not because they were too afraid to resist, but because they chose to. That was worth everything. Captain Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Dawn and watched the massive space station grow larger in the viewing screen. It was the biggest thing he had ever seen. The grand station orbited a purple planet and stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a hive. This was humanity's first meeting with the Galactic Council. Earth had finally built faster-than-light engines, and now humans could travel to the stars. For 3 months, they had sent messages into space hoping someone would answer. The Council had responded. They invited Earth's representatives to talk about joining the galactic community. Yunwoo felt excited, but also worried. Something about the Council's messages seemed cold and unfriendly. Dr. Yuna Park walked up beside him. She was the ship's expert on alien cultures and biology. Her eyes shined with wonder as she looked at the station. 47 different alien species live there, she said softly. Can you imagine? All those different worlds working together. Working together or working for someone. Hyunwoo asked. He had been a military man before becoming a diplomat. His instincts told him to be careful. The ship docked at a landing bay. Armed alien guards waited for them. The guards were tall and covered in gray scales. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. They did not speak or welcome the humans. They just pointed toward a corridor. Hyunwoo led his team through the station. The corridors were huge, built for creatures much larger than humans. Strange aliens walked past them. Some had multiple arms. Others floated in the air. A few looked at the humans with what seemed like disgust. They entered a massive chamber. Hundreds of alien representatives sat in rising circles around a central platform. At the highest point sat the High Arbiter, a creature named Velmoth. He belonged to a species called the Kelthari. His body looked like a mantis mixed with a spider. Multiple eyes studied the humans with cold intelligence. "Humans of Earth," Velmoth's voice boomed through translation devices. "You have entered Council space. We have evaluated your species according to our laws. You are classified as Category 3 primitives." Yuna stepped forward. "We come in peace. We hope to learn from you and share what we know." Several aliens in the chamber made sounds that the translators interpreted as laughter. Velmoth raised one of his blade-like arms. "Silence. You do not speak unless given permission. You will listen to the Council's judgment." Hyunwoo felt anger rise in his chest, but he stayed quiet. He needed to hear what they would say. "The Council has ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years, Velmoth continued. "We maintain order and peace. Young species like yours must accept our protection. You will surrender 80% of your resources as tribute. You will accept Council governors on your worlds. You will limit your military to defense forces only. You will not travel beyond systems we designate for you." "That's not protection," Hyunwoo said, unable to stay silent. "That's slavery." The chamber erupted with angry sounds from the aliens. Guards moved their weapons toward the humans. Velmoth's eyes narrowed. "You dare speak? You who have barely left your own star system? The Council offers you survival. Refuse and you will be designated as hostile. Hostile species are eliminated." Yuna touched Hyunwoo's arm, trying to calm him. "High Arbiter, surely we can negotiate better terms. Give us time to discuss this with our government." Velmoth seemed to think about this. "Very well. The Council is generous. You have 7 days to accept our terms. Return here with your answer." The meeting ended. Guards escorted the humans back to their ship. As soon as they were aboard and leaving the station, Hyunwoo called his team together. "Start analyzing everything we saw and heard," he ordered. "Yuna, I need you to research the Council's history. Find out what happened to other species who joined them." For 3 days they traveled back toward Earth. Yuna barely slept as she dug through the data they had collected. On the 4th day, she came to Hyunwoo with a pale face. "I found something," she said, her voice shaking. 12 species were classified as Category 3 in the last 1,000 years. All 12 refused the Council's terms. "Where are they now?" Hyunwoo asked, though he already knew the answer. "Gone. Completely wiped out. No survivors. The Council called it necessary pacification." Hyunwoo felt cold. "They never intended to let us refuse. The 7 days is just for show. They want to look reasonable before they attack." He immediately tried to send a warning message to Earth, but the communication channels were jammed. Someone was blocking their signal. "Captain!" his sensor officer shouted. "I'm picking up unusual energy readings near human space. Multiple signatures. They match Council military vessels." Hyunwoo ran to the sensor station. His worst fears appeared on the screen. 20 Council warships were positioning themselves near Earth's colonies. "How long until we reach Earth?" he demanded. 6 days at maximum speed." "The Council gave us 7 days," Yuna said quietly. "But they're already moving into position." Before Hyunwoo could respond, an emergency signal burst through the jamming. It was from New Seoul, Earth's largest colony beyond the home system. The message was broken and filled with static. "This is New Seoul Colony. Under attack. Council ships. They're firing. Casualties in the millions. Shields down, please, anyone." The message cut off. Hyunwoo stood frozen. New Seoul had over 2 million people. His sister lived there with her family. "They already fired the first shot," he said, his voice hard as steel. "Before we even had a chance to answer. This was always going to happen." He turned to his communications officer. "Send everything we learned to Earth on all channels. Keep transmitting until they receive it. Tell them the Council has already started their attack. Tell them to prepare for war." Yuna looked at him with tears in her eyes. 2 million people. They killed 2 million people just to make a point. No, Hyunwoo said. They killed 2 million people because they think we're weak. They think we'll surrender in fear. He looked at his crew. Every face showed shock, anger, and grief. Get us to Earth as fast as possible, he ordered. And someone find me Admiral Taeho. We need every ship, every weapon, and every soldier humanity has. The Council thinks they're dealing with primitives. They think this will be easy. He stared at the screen showing Council warships gathering near human space. They're about to learn they made a terrible mistake. Lieutenant Jaewon Kim's fighter shook as explosions filled the space around New Seoul. He pulled hard on the controls, dodging a blast of green plasma that turned one of his squadron members into scattered atoms. His radio screamed with voices calling for help, reporting deaths, begging for reinforcements that would never come. Red 5 is gone. Red 5 is... They're everywhere. We can't... My engines are hit. I'm going down. Jaewon tried to block out the voices and focus on survival. He fired his missiles at a Council warship, but they exploded uselessly against energy shields. The enemy weapons punched through his squadron like they were made of paper. Below him, New Seoul Colony burned. The Council's pacification fleet had arrived without warning. 30 warships against a colony that had only 12 defense platforms and 40 fighters. The platforms were destroyed in the first 5 minutes. The fighters lasted 10 minutes longer. Jaewon was one of 8 pilots still alive from his original squadron of 24. All fighters, retreat to the moon base, came the order from his dying commander. We can't stop them. Save yourselves. Warn Earth. Jaewon wanted to stay and fight, but his fuel was almost gone and his weapons were empty. He turned his fighter toward the outer system and ran. Behind him, the Council ships fired again at New Seoul. He tried not to think about the millions of people down there. He tried not to think about how helpless he felt. When he finally reached the moon base, only 5 fighters from his squadron landed with him. 3 more had been destroyed during the retreat. Earth had received Captain Hyunwoo's warning, but it came too late. The Council attacked 4 places at once. New Seoul was gone. Luna Base was under attack. Mars colonies were being bombed. Jupiter's mining stations went silent. Admiral Taeho stood in Earth's military command center and watched his forces die on a dozen screens. He was 60 years old with white hair and a face marked by old scars. He had fought in 3 wars between Earth nations before humanity finally united. Now he faced an enemy unlike anything he had ever imagined. Sir, Mars reports their shields are failing, an officer said. They're requesting immediate evacuation. Tell them to hold as long as they can, Taeho replied. His voice was steady, but inside he felt like he was drowning. We need time to get the civilian transports away. Admiral, the Council fleet is moving toward Earth, 15 capital ships. They'll be here in 6 hours. Taeho looked at the tactical display. Earth had 23 warships in orbit, and another 40 scattered across the system. The Council had overwhelming numbers and far better technology. Every simulation showed the same result. Earth would fall within days. Evacuate all cities near military targets, he ordered. Move everyone underground, and send a message to all ships. We fight for every second, every meter. Make them pay for every inch of space. On Mars, engineer Mina Choi worked frantically in the shipyards even as explosions shook the ground above her. She was 30 years old and had spent her life building spaceships. Now she was trying to understand how to fight them. Her team had recovered pieces of a Council fighter that Jaewon had destroyed. Mina studied the wreckage with desperate intensity. The technology was far ahead of human engineering, but it was also old, very old. Look at this, she said to her assistant, pointing at the shield generator. This design is ancient. It's powerful but inflexible. It's designed to stop energy weapons, but see this? The harmonics are all wrong for physical impacts. What does that mean? It means their shields are made to fight enemies like them. Enemies who use plasma and lasers. Mina's eyes lit up with an idea. But we still use kinetic weapons, railguns, missiles, physical projectiles moving at high speed. Will that work? I don't know, Mina admitted. But it's the only advantage I can find. She sent her findings to Admiral Taeho immediately. The Battle of Titan was humanity's first major stand against the Council. Admiral Taeho gathered every available ship near Saturn's largest moon. 40 human vessels faced 70 Council warships. The odds were impossible, but Taeho had a plan. All ships hold your plasma weapons, he ordered. Load only kinetic ammunition, railguns and missiles. Fire on my command. The Council fleet approached confidently. They had destroyed 4 human positions already. They expected this to be just as easy. Tejo waited until the enemy was close. Then he gave the order. Hundreds of railgun rounds and thousands of missiles flew toward the council ships. The enemy's shields flickered and struggled against the physical projectiles. Several shields collapsed completely. 3 council ships exploded. 5 more took heavy damage. For a moment, humanity had hope. Then the council fleet adjusted their shields and returned fire. Their plasma weapons tore through human ships like they were nothing. Tejo watched 16 of his vessels die in minutes. The survivors fought desperately, but they were outmatched. "Admiral, we need to retreat," his second-in-command shouted. Tejo knew she was right, but retreating meant abandoning Titan Station and its 50,000 people. He looked at the tactical display again. He had lost 16 ships, but he had destroyed 8 enemy vessels and damaged 20 more. Humanity had hurt them. That was something. "All ships, full retreat to the Oort cloud," he ordered. "Scatter and hide. We'll regroup beyond Pluto." As his ship jumped away, Tejo activated Protocol Ember. It was a plan he had created years ago, hoping he would never need it. If Earth was ever invaded and the battle seemed lost, humanity would retreat to the outer system and rebuild in secret. They would hide in the darkness beyond the planets and prepare to strike back. Back on Earth, Captain Hyunwoo and Dr. Yuna watched council ships take positions around the planet. The enemy demanded immediate surrender. Earth's government refused. The bombardment began. Billions of people fled underground as orbital strikes destroyed military bases, shipyards, and industrial centers. The Council was careful not to destroy everything. They wanted Earth's resources and people as slaves, not corpses. Yuna worked with the military now, analyzing Council psychology and tactics. She had spent weeks studying everything they knew about the enemy. "They've been the dominant power for 10,000 years, she explained to a room full of officers. "That makes them predictable. They haven't faced a real challenge in millennia. They're arrogant. They think they've already won. They have won," General Bora Song said bitterly. She commanded what was left of Mars' defenses and had barely escaped with her life. "We've lost half our fleet. Our colonies are destroyed. Earth is under siege." "They think they've won," Yuna corrected, "but they've made mistakes. They underestimate us because we're young. They use the same tactics against every enemy because those tactics always worked before. They're powerful but rigid." "How does that help us?" Bora asked. "It means we can surprise them," Yuna said. "If we can survive long enough to adapt and rebuild, we can hit them in ways they don't expect." Admiral Tejo arrived at the hidden shipyards beyond Pluto. Thousands of people were already there. Refugees and military personnel who had escaped. Engineer Mina arrived with her findings about Council weaknesses. "We have 6 months, Tejo told his commanders. "Maybe less. The Council thinks we're finished. They've reduced their blockade to minimum forces. That gives us time, and time to do what?" someone asked. Tejo's face hardened. "Time to build. Time to learn. Time to prepare our revenge. They killed millions of our people. They thought we would break. But humanity doesn't break. We bend, we adapt, and we strike back." He looked at each person in the room. The Council fired the first shot. "Now we're going to teach them what happens when you start a war with humans." The hidden shipyards beyond Pluto worked day and night. Every person who escaped the Council's attack had a job to do. Scientists worked beside soldiers. Engineers taught refugees how to build weapons. Children too young to fight ran supplies between workstations. Humanity had 6 months to transform from victims into warriors. Engineer Mina Choi led the design team for humanity's new ships. She worked 20 hours a day, sleeping in her workshop. The old human warships had tried to match Council power with bigger guns and stronger shields. That strategy had failed. "We can't beat them with strength," Mina explained to her team. "So we'll beat them with speed and surprise." She designed ships called Ghosts. They were small, only 50 meters long, and built for one purpose: hit fast and disappear. Each Ghost carried no heavy armor. Instead, they used experimental stealth technology that bent light and radio waves around them. They were nearly invisible until they fired their weapons. "The Council's sensors are designed to find big threats," Mina said. "Capital ships and fleets. They won't see something this small until it's too late." Scientist Yunho Park worked in a different section of the shipyards. He studied the Council shield technology that Mina had discovered. After 3 months of testing, he found the exact weakness. "Their shields oscillate at a fixed frequency," he announced excitedly. "They're incredibly strong against energy weapons because those weapons hit at predictable speeds. But kinetic weapons, physical objects, they hit with varying impact forces. He showed a simulation to Admiral Tejo. If we fire thousands of projectiles at different speeds and angles, the shields can't adjust fast enough. They'll overload and collapse. How many projectiles? Tejo asked. At least 10,000 per target. Probably more. Tejo smiled grimly. Then we'll give them more. Humanity developed a new weapon system called Railgun Swarm. Each ghost ship carried 6 railgun turrets. Each turret could fire 100 projectiles per second. When multiple ships fired together, they could throw 50,000 metal slugs at a target in just 10 seconds. Commander Sungmin Lee trained the boarding teams. He was 45 years old and had spent 20 years in special forces before the war. Now he taught civilians how to fight in zero gravity and how to board enemy ships. The council hasn't fought a boarding action in thousands of years, Sungmin told his students. They don't expect anyone to get close enough to board them. That's their weakness. His teams practiced every day. They learned to move through ships in spacesuits. They learned to fight with weapons in tight corridors. They learned to kill efficiently and without mercy. Dr. Yuna Park developed psychological warfare protocols. She had studied council communications for months and understood how they thought. They see themselves as superior, she explained. Every species they've conquered reinforced that belief. When we hit them, we need to make them doubt everything they know about themselves. She created messages designed to terrify the council. Videos of human soldiers that made them look like unstoppable killers. Fake reports of human forces 10 times larger than reality. Broadcasts showing council ships being destroyed with ease. Fear is a weapon, Yuna said. And we're going to use it. Captain Hana Cho was the best pilot humanity had left. She had survived 3 battles against the council and destroyed more enemy fighters than anyone else. Admiral Tejo chose her to test the first prototype ghost ship. The test flight almost killed her. The Ghost's engines were too powerful for its light frame. The ship shook apart at high speed and nearly exploded. Hana barely made it back to the shipyard. The design needs work, she reported calmly, despite nearly dying. Mina spent 3 weeks fixing the problems. The next test flight went perfectly. Hana flew the Ghost through the outer system, testing its stealth and weapons. The ship was invisible to sensors. Its railguns tore through test targets like they were made of paper. It's perfect, Hana said when she landed. Build 50 of them. Build 100. These ships can win the war. Admiral Tejo watched all the progress and felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. 6 months ago, we were dying, he said to his command staff. The council thought they had destroyed us. But we didn't die. We evolved. He pulled up images of the new ghost ships, the railgun swarms, the trained boarding teams. The council is occupying our system right now. They're mining our asteroids and colonizing our planets. They think they've won. But they've never faced an enemy like us. They've never fought humans who have nothing left to lose. Meanwhile, on Jupiter's moon Europa, the council had established a mining operation. 200 alien workers and 50 soldiers extracted valuable materials from beneath the ice. They felt safe. Earth's forces were gone. The primitives were extinct or hiding in fear. Commander Sungmin watched the council base from the darkness of space. He floated in a spacesuit 500 kilometers away, using a telescope to study the enemy. Beside him floated 50 more soldiers, all invisible in the black void. This is our first target, Sungmin said over the secure channel. We hit them hard. We hit them fast. And we make sure everyone in the council knows that humanity is not extinct. Behind them, 50 ghost ships waited in stealth mode. Each ship was invisible, drifting silently through space. Inside each ship, teams prepared for their first real battle since the defeat at Titan. Lieutenant Jae-won Kim commanded a fighter wing attached to the Ghost Fleet. He had spent 6 months training in the new tactics and learning to fly escort for the stealth ships. His fighter had been modified with limited stealth technology. It wasn't perfect invisibility, but it was enough. All ships report ready, came the message from Admiral Tejo, who watched from a command ship far behind the attack force. Sungmin checked his weapon one last time. Around him, his soldiers did the same. Everyone knew the odds. Everyone knew this might be a one-way mission. But everyone also knew that humanity needed this victory. They needed to prove they could still fight. Begin Operation Razor's Edge, Tejo ordered. The ghost ships came alive. Their engines ignited silently in the vacuum of space. They accelerated toward Europa at speeds that would have torn apart the old human warships. The council sensors on Europa detected nothing. Sung Min and his boarding teams followed in assault pods, tucked in close to the ghost ships to hide their signatures. The council miners worked, unaware. The council soldiers patrolled, bored and complacent. They had destroyed humanity's military 6 months ago. There was no threat here. This was just easy occupation duty. Then the first railgun rounds hit the base shields. 10,000 projectiles in 5 seconds. The shields flickered, fluctuated, and collapsed. 5,000 more projectiles tore into the base structures. Explosions ripped through buildings. Council soldiers died before they could reach their weapons. Jaewon's fighters screamed in, firing missiles at the few enemy ships trying to launch. He destroyed 3 vessels before they cleared the landing pads. Sungmin's boarding teams crashed into the main facility. They moved through corridors with ruthless efficiency, clearing rooms and eliminating resistance. The council soldiers who survived the initial strike fought back, but they were confused and terrified. They had never seen humans fight like this. The battle lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, the council mining base on Europa was completely destroyed. 197 alien workers were dead. All 50 council soldiers were dead. Not a single human died in the attack. Sungmin stood in the ruins of the command center and activated the communication system. He sent a message on all council frequencies. This is humanity. You thought you killed us. You thought you won. You were wrong. We're not extinct. We're not defeated. We're just getting started. And we're coming for you. Across the solar system, council forces received the message. On the council's homeworld, High Arbiter Velmoth watched the recording with disbelief, turning to rage. How? He demanded. We destroyed them. They should be extinct. His military advisors had no answer. The primitives were supposed to be gone. This was impossible, but the evidence was clear. Humanity had survived, rebuilt, and struck back. And the Battle of Europa was only the beginning.